Thank you all for joining. We are very glad you're here. So glad to have Kylie. You guys are in for a real treat. Talk about having an expert and learn from an expert today. Kylie is one that I'm very excited to introduce you to and to ask some hard questions, some easy questions. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. But if you're new to this series, the series is all about, our series is a monthly webinar series called Missing Chapters. And it's this opportunity where we can kind of pull out topics that maybe didn't get into the handbook and discuss them, share some really cool experiences so that we all can learn together. And so today's topic, Kylie, thank you so much for joining us, is all about leadership. And so I'm really excited to dive into that and like how we can think about it and what kind of trends we're seeing today and really dive into the fact that maybe some resistance is happening with leadership today and leaders not being super comfortable with, connecting with their employees and how do we handle that as HR leaders? So I'm the host, but really Kylie's the star. So just quickly, I'm Anna. I've been at Nava for a year and I'm so glad Kylie's here because again, talking about an expert in the field, she is going to kind of walk us through and give us some thoughts around this idea of transactional leadership and how we can learn how to be better leaders. So, Kylie, please introduce us to you.
So nice to meet everybody. Thank you for those that are joining. I started HR a long time ago, over 20, almost 25 years ago, and I've worked in any capacity from employee benefits to employee relations to been an executive now for about 15 years as a chief people officer and at that kind of C-suite level. And I got my doctorate degree in technically leadership and for innovation, but focus really was on the neuroscience of team behavior and what really drives team performance from a neurological standpoint. And so anytime I get to kind of share that information from the science standpoint, it's really fun for me because it's things that make a lot of sense, but that we don't always know how to, you call it brain hacks almost. We don't know how to hack it all the time. And because we're still humans and there's all these components that play into it. So much of my recent life work has been really studying the neuroscience of team dynamics and team behaviors, which to me, leadership is never a hierarchical thing. It's if you have followers and you can inspire and make a difference, you're a great leader in a lot of ways. And so that really applies to anybody in any situation. And so it's always fun to look at it at that lens.
Didn't I tell you guys? Expert here. Super excited. You kind of have like this nice mix of, the science, the experience, and then framing it into, how HR leaders can learn and then help their people. So let's jump into it. And if you're just joining us, please put in the chat where you're calling in from, or if you've got questions and you want to ask Kylie live, please also put those in the chat. We'd love to hear them. And so glad you're here. Okay, so yes, we're going to talk all about leadership today. You just heard from Kylie, her background. This is why it's so important to us to have her on today. Okay, Kylie, let's kick it off. And as we think about leadership and where we want to start here, I thought, we could start with just like kind of outlining what is transactional leadership, so to speak. Like when we say that word, what does that really mean? And why do you think leaders kind of default to that at work, like as a safety?
Yeah. So how I would define it, there's probably a lot of ways you could. How I define transactional leadership really is those moments in passing where it's focused on the tactical. Is it a KPI? Is it a number? Is it an update? Is it a process? Is it an interaction to serve solely the purpose of one piece of information or maybe a couple pieces of information versus transformational interactions, which take a lot more brain power because you're engaging in a conversation or information or engaging on a level that activates different parts of your brain. And so the reason that often leaders by default engage in transactional leadership, and we always say we're going a million miles an hour throughout the day just doing our thing, it's actually just easier for our brains. we don't have to engage in
Hmm.
emotion. We don't have to think. It's a very specific, like, I'm after this piece of information. Here's what I need. So our brains are really trained to be as efficient as possible. It becomes uncomfortable cognitively for us. It takes energy to do that. And so by
Hmm.
default, our brains are sort of just launching us into these transactional patterns because it's easiest for us. And so it cognitively takes more effort to really stop and engage sort of that the social network part of the brain that says, let's let's have a conversation, let's engage in our emotions a little more, and not touchy-feely emotions, but just more than, hey, can I have, the latest revenue number? Um, Empathy takes a lot more cognitive effort. And so we're
Hmm.
just sort of, I don't want to say robots, we're not, but our brains don't want to use energy. So they're gonna by default not to. And it takes a lot more effort to be really engaged with somebody.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like when you say it, it makes so much sense. But in
Mhm.
practice, you're like, yeah, when your boss is like, hey, go do this thing, or without saying, hello, how are you today? You kind of are like, wait a minute, can't
No.
you be human for a minute? So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's really interesting about our brains. Like,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
now we're gonna, we'll go throughout this whole talk about how do we get better at that. But that's a really great way to set that up. And now, let's train our brains. So to kind of put some more like framing around that, can you kind of share a moment in your career when like that deeper connection with a colleague or employee like changed the outcome of the situation, just to set us up with this idea?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in my career, early in my career and later in my career. Early on in my career, I was probably 22, 23. I won't say how old I am now, not to date myself, but I worry a lot when I speak because this gentleman probably changed my or did change the whole trajectory of my career. And that's not putting it lightly. He was somebody that really cared and could have a difficult conversation from a place of kindness and wanting to see somebody else inspired and do well. And so when you're 22, 23, you get into a role, I'm like, I got to prove myself. I'm going to do a good job. I'm ambitious anyway, so couple that with my extroverted nature. I just talked a lot in meetings. I had a lot of ideas. It was always, me throwing out ideas, or I had to talk, and I didn't listen a lot in all of that and didn't really realize it. And at that age, didn't step back long enough to pause. And so he pulled me aside one day and he said, Kylie, nobody likes you. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's harsh. And he didn't, I mean, he might have said it a little kinder, but not too much. And he said, but I have to tell you this because I can see the passion and I can see your intent is to do a great job, but it's really rubbing others the wrong way because it's, I'm a know-it-all or I have to have the last word, whatever, it was. And I went home and I just remember crying so hard because, well, number one, that was not how looking out at myself, I would have envisioned it because that was not my intent. But it was also a moment of that's not who I am or who I want to be. So why am I behaving that way? But then the other part was how amazing that I had somebody that cared about me that much. He's probably in his 50s at the time to take this young college grad aside and say, hey, I'm trying to help you because I see potential in you. That to me is a transformational relationship. He could have very easily just let me annoy my coworkers. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just wasn't going to have close relationships at work. But I got
Yeah.
promoted a year later. I started listening, which we all know as you get older, you get a little wiser, and hopefully we all listen a little more than when we're younger. It it was a moment in my career that I don't know that I'd be where I am right now had it not been for him caring enough to get past the work transactions and really sit me aside and have that moment with me. And then the other one I had later in my career, who's still a very dear friend of mine, work with him to this day. We've worked together about 10, 11 years and been a CEO in a lot of capacities with me. Oh my gosh. And he's probably not on here, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. But when I first started working with him, I mean, for the first month, I'm like, I'm going to quit this job. I can't stand him. He's, completely different personality. He's super smart though. And I kept a leadership journal and still do to this day. And so I'd write my emotions down, like, he made me, I'm going to quit this job. He didn't listen, blah, blah, blah. And I'd go back and reflect. Well, there was always a pattern that happened. I'm like, he's challenging me all the time. I don't like that my ideas are being challenged in my space because he wasn't in HR. I'm like, stop challenging my ideas. And it wasn't about him at all, but he just challenged me. And through the leadership journal, I realized like, oh, this is my pattern of behavior. But more importantly, 10 or 11 years later, we have found such a trusting relationship in one another that I never question his intent when he's giving me information to help me. He's going to be my truth broker, that person that comes to me and says, hey, this is a blind spot for you, or it's not working. Like, did you know this? Or he knows my good days, my bad days, what makes me tick, what doesn't. And it's always coming from such a place of trust and integrity. To have that has been really invaluable because as humans, we're always, I think by nature, we just want to provide value and care for others. But it's hard to hear things that go against maybe what we view of ourselves, or we get defensive. It's sort of a mechanism. You can kind of feel it in your tummy. So when you can find those people that doesn't sort of create those reactions in you, those are the sort of transformational interactions that can completely change who you are as not just a leader, but as a person. And hold on to them tight because and sometimes you don't even know they're there. They're just a feeling. It's like, oh, he told me something really hard, and I'm like all calm about it. Instead of, ooh,
Yeah.
oh.
Wow,
So
that is
that's a
so
long-winded answer,
fascinating.
but both of those gentlemen deserve a lot of credit for who they are as people and leaders that have really helped shape me as a leader as well.
That's so awesome because it also helps not, I mean, it just kind of helps frame what we're talking about here as far as like transactional leadership versus the transformational leadership and how easy it is, back to your original statement with your brain, how easy it is just to fall into that transactional. But these two actually took it one step further. Maybe sounds like the last example you had to do a little work there too, because
Yeah, I was about 20 years older, so that helped. But
yeah. But how good that is to like even frame it, like let's classify what's happening here, and then let's break it down as we talk through like what this means. Um, but I don't want to skip over the leadership journal. That is
yeah,
really cool. I think that's a great tip for all of us. Tell us more about
yeah,
how that started and why
yeah.
that's been so valuable for you.
I'm glad thank you for bringing that up. I do a lot of leadership development and coaching, and I'm like, just hear me out, folks. Just try. I was like, oh, no,
Yeah, I want to
just
try it.
journal. But no, a leadership journal, and I've never known what else called other than a leadership journal, but it was a way for me when I would get really emotional because I'm very passionate. So it'd either be I'm really excited or I'm mad. I don't get sad a lot, but I would get like, just you just feel it. I'm like, I need to process this. So sometimes it would be, I just write a word that says, why does this person think they always know best? But it was my way of being human, knowing that some of the things that
Mm.
come across for us, we have blind spots that I'm emotional and probably need to censor myself, but I'm still feeling, so I needed to process.
Hmm.
I've done this for I probably have 30 plus journals. And it's evolved since then. In the beginning, it really was just free writing. Then it was, I could tell when I had a bad day because it'd be 3 words and it was, very short. Some people will use pictures out of magazines to capture how they're feeling. So it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
like free flow writing. It can be words, it can be coloring, it can be magazine picture, whatever. And as I've
Hmm.
gotten older, how I use is I'll take themes. So, resiliency, for example, or defensiveness. Defensiveness is one that over time I really focused on. So anytime I felt defensive in a meeting or a situation, I would go straight to the journal. I'd write down the
Hmm.
context like meeting 422 or 423 with Anna. She asked me about XYZ topic and she challenged my viewpoint and I wanted to punch her. Or, whatever. It can be
No.
as simple as that,
Yeah.
or I
Yeah.
felt like she didn't trust my knowledge, or I
Mm.
felt insecure because she asked me a question I couldn't answer. But then what you do is anytime I would have moments of like high emotion or, those extremes, I'd go back to my journals and say, okay, like let me process this a little bit because they're fleeting. These moments are fleeting. And
Mm.
really our emotions are only created from experiences. They don't actually exist. We make them based on
Mm.
how we condition ourselves to react.
Our
So I'm like, okay,
brains.
Yeah, our range. Yeah. So I'm like, I am always acting defensive when they talk to me about this. Well, if I trained
Interesting.
myself to be defensive, I can train myself not to be defensive. And so it really was just sort of a gut check in a very safe way to
Hmm.
say, nobody's reading this. I don't have to show this to anybody. There's no
Yeah.
rules. It's whatever works for you,
Hmm.
as a way to sort of be a mirror for yourself. And it did. Like the example with my second mentor, it probably stopped me from saying, I'm out because I can't work with you.
Yeah.
Because I realized I'm like, okay, maybe we have different personalities. He's just challenging me. Like, it's not me.
Yeah.
And now he's one of my best friends in the world. And I think we'll always work together in some capacity. So that's where I use
That's
the
really
leadership
cool.
journal. So I use the word journal loosely, but really just a way to reflect on your blind spots and a safe space to just be human. I mean,
Hmm.
we all have those days. We all do. But
We are literally human. And
sometimes
so do
fun
the
and
people we work with are also
yes,
human, which I love that you're like, these are all tips to help, get us to a place where we can retrain our brain to work harder. Don't get
absolutely.
lazy, brain. Connect and push ourselves to either connect with ourselves, process things, or with others. Because I think in our roles as leaders or responsible for entire organizations, which I think most probably on this call are HR professionals managing their entire population, and they have to be able to, maybe it's this journal that will help, or maybe it's just these little takeaways about how do we help train our own brains to be more transformational or help others. So, and that's what's so interesting about your second example is because the second mentor, and I don't know if he was being transactional in a way that he, it was maybe borderline, but you kind of helped him and you get to a very transformational area. So I'm curious to either dig on that piece or just in general as we think about how do we help others
Mhm.
get to
That
this
is,
spot.
sorry, I didn't mean to
No, no,
I
no, no. I just,
step on a
yeah.
nuance that I didn't even, I mean, now that you say it, I know, but that I didn't even think about in the example. It was very transactional in the beginning. They were quick drive-bys on do this. Did you think about this? Do this, but we didn't know each other either. And I was taking it very personal because
Mm-hmm.
I'm an idea person and I'm a relational person. And
Mm-hmm.
he's an alpha male type of guy, but he's a very servant leader, like an amazing person. But I didn't know that about him yet. And
Ah.
so I think within that defensiveness, but also he cared enough to keep trying. Like he
He
never's
was.
like, oh, she's always this way, so I'm just going to build a bad relationship. He was
Yeah.
always humble enough and open enough that he could tell that if there was tension, he had that, that emotional intelligence enough
Mm-hmm.
too, that we were very lucky in that regard that it was never a toxic relationship. And I think the combination of the two allowed us to come together in a very transformational way.
Hmm.
But it's an example of where a transactional relationship, had it not been in the right hands or with folks that didn't have a vested interest in making it work. When you're a CEO and a chief people officer or HR officer, the smart CEOs will realize how important that relationship is. We had a vested interest in collaborating and trusting each other. But
Hmm.
a lot of times at work, you don't always have that. Not in a negative way. You just don't. There's different departments or different
Yeah.
areas, or you don't. There's just something you don't like about each other. So you never get past that transactional to have enough patience with each other or enough age on your side. Again, we were both at a point in our careers where we could step back and reflect, or at a point where you
Okay.
step back and say, "Ooh, what am I doing in this situation that I could do differently?" So I think it was sort of
Mm.
a combination of multiple factors that came together really well. But it's also where all of those factors did have to come together very well to create what we created. And it shows how
Hmm.
difficult it can be in the day-to-day workplace. And nobody's right or wrong or malicious
Hmm.
or trying to do anything self-serving necessarily. It's just the way that humans go about it. It takes a lot of effort to do that. Um,
Hmm.
and a lot of times it does kind of start with ourselves.
Yeah, see, that's what's so interesting. It's like this is I don't even know if you meant to do it, but it's like a perfect example of like how it does take time and the right ingredients have to be in the right place, to then make it happen. but
Mhm.
it feels like there's like a theme of just like he was willing, you were willing. There's this humble, maybe some vulnerability.
Absolutely.
How have you, so that was an area where he helped you. I'm curious if there's like other examples, just, as we're talking about what it takes to create these connections. Because like you said, no one's trying to be malicious. No one's trying to sabotage, hopefully.
Oh, that's
Hopefully
probably,
we've weeded
probably
them
the
out.
very, but yeah, yeah. In general, yes.
Hopefully they are not working at your company. But if they are, no. Uh, yeah, so let's talk through like what are some of those things, because we are so busy. Maybe it is just what you said. Trying to be open, have a conversation. Because I think there's this role of vulnerability in leadership and it gets reflected. So kind of you were saying that with your journal, it helps you process things to then be a better leader for your people that then reflects and, kind of just like a domino effects. But I'm just curious, like your thoughts there as we kind of wrap up this section of
Yeah.
the difference between the two, what it takes and why it's so important. Like let's hit on vulnerability and what it plays in leadership.
Oh, vulnerability, that's a tough one, right? It's yeah, and authenticity is too. It's do you want to be your most authentic self all the time, 100%? Well, but no, right? I mean, but we're just not. I'm not this. I am the same person at my core, the same values, the same
Yes.
moral with my husband as I am at work. But I don't act the same at work because it just wouldn't be the right play, right? There's a
Right.
time
Yeah. The
place for
setting.
something.
Yeah.
But the vulnerability piece and helping people, where I have always said, okay, this is where I can make a difference. Is at the end of the day, I have to be able to put my head down at night. Can I feel good about the decisions I made? And I always anchor myself in those that helped me. So, or stories, because some people maybe haven't had that experience yet, or something that they can latch onto. So, what have I heard that I knew made a difference that really resonated with me? So, early in my career, the gentleman that had that conversation, he taught me, wow, hey, that was probably hard for him and me. Like that wasn't easy for
Yeah.
him.
True.
Let's be real. That's not easy for anybody. Or like termination conversations if you're HR people. I always say you never terminate anybody. They terminate themselves. It doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean you're not going to cry on the way home, and it doesn't mean they have to go not have a hard conversation with their family. But if you had honest conversations with them, gave them opportunities, and they didn't change their behavior, that's not your fault. That's not your
Mm.
fault. As long as you can do everything you can. And so that's where the vulnerability with teams for me is vulnerability doesn't mean fault. It doesn't mean a lack of accountability. And it doesn't mean you have to kind of lay yourself out there either. I absolutely can be vulnerable in the areas that I'm not great at and admit that. But that
Mm.
doesn't mean I have to pull back on the areas I'm strong at. I am a great energy source. I don't have to be like, no, it's okay. I'm not great. Okay. I'm horrible at details. Horrible. I have to work very, very, very hard at it. I have some amazing people that have helped me not get fired that are on my team. That's like, oh my gosh, if I didn't have them, I probably would have been fired by now. They're amazing at that. But I never step away from being confident in what I know I'm good at. And I think sometimes people become too vulnerable or too willing to kind of throw themselves under the bus to make others feel better. And you don't have to. And I think that's the
Yeah.
part that's important because they know that they can be confident to them. It isn't
Mm.
oh, they can see you being confident in your abilities while also embracing theirs. It's not a
Yes.
mutual exclusivity thing. It's we both can be great. Just because I'm great doesn't lessen you. It's not this. It's let's both be great, maybe in different ways. And so for me, I always want to serve as that example of you can be vulnerable. You can see me on this talk. I kind of just, I don't know, talk. This is what people get. Um, I'm not all of a sudden going to go button up and do something different. And the work environment from HR, what they get is what they get. Um, but allowing others to see the safety in that is important in those transformational. Otherwise, they can't trust you enough to embrace that.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. It's like we can both be equally great at certain things or different
Mhm.
things, but I
Yep,
like the idea of
we can
like,
suck at the same things, and we are just not
yeah.
good.
But not throwing yourself under the bus to like hopefully help lift someone else up. It's like, no, we don't have to do that. Yeah. That's not what being vulnerable means. I like that a lot. Okay. So some of you on the call are probably thinking, this is awesome. I am. Kylie, as I think about this and just how important it is, sometimes, and even in your examples, just recognizing it is the hardest part. It's like our, does our team have the connection to be able to be more transformational versus transactional? Am I a leader that's doing this? How do you, what are some signs or some techniques that we can think about either for ourselves or us coaching other leaders, where we're like, ooh, we lack connection. Like this is maybe there might be some room here, like to improve.
Pay attention to your body. Number one, every experience that we encounter or have, I mean, it's a physiological right away. So if you're all of a sudden in a room with somebody and you're just like checked out, or you're just quiet, and you don't feel a passion for maybe it's you don't have a passion for challenging their ideas, or you don't get excited when they get excited, or you're sitting on a Zoom call again with 15 other people, and you're like, I really don't care. You
Mm.
might have a really transactional interaction with a lot of people. You could just be tired that day too. So it's like, let's look at the big picture. But some of those signs where it's like, ooh, I don't feel that, because things we care about or that we're engaged with, we usually have some sort of reaction to above the norm, good or bad, healthy or not. And
Mhm.
so that's number one. I always say is how much am I invested in this, and how much do I care about this, or not care about this? Does my blood pressure rise? If you start getting defensive, the blood pressure, it could be a sign that it's like, ooh, this relationship is it at a transactional point where I don't feel trusting or safe of that person's intent? So maybe I need to work on that relationship, because they're probably not a bad person, but I'm getting really defensive and my blood pressure is rising and I don't know why.
Hmm.
So those sort of things. But then it's also as leaders, it's just like I don't put on running shoes and all of a sudden tomorrow I'm going to go run a marathon. I'm not running today, right? It's like I don't run. I'm not going to run a marathon tomorrow. So it really is the same thing with our brains. It is, and the older you get, the harder it is. That's why it's like, oh, they're old and stubborn. Well, yeah, because think of how many years they've been doing those same habits and patterns. So the older you get, the harder it is to change. And so finding some way to either trigger yourself visually, or in my notebook after I got that feedback, it was listen. Like at the top of every page before the meeting, listen. I just wrote it on my paper. That way I knew visually, if I looked down, shut my mouth, shut my mouth, shut my mouth, because my default was to talk. But as the leader, taking those steps to say, okay, how can I change my behavior 1% each day so
I
that it
like that.
becomes a new habit? Because you're not going to do it overnight, unfortunately. But it's one of those that the time's going to pass anyway. And maybe a year later, you wake up and you're running a marathon because you did 1% each day. Um, the effort comes in being disciplined enough to do those small habits when you really don't want to. And so that's where I say find the easy shortcuts for you. For mine, it was simply writing listen at the top of my meeting notes. I always had a legal pad, write listen, or my notebook or whatever. Some people have post-it notes or their vision board, the vision boards with, this is my dream. There's something to be said for seeing what you want to achieve. It keeps it in front of you so that you're paying attention to it. And so whatever that is for you, find it and find the easy. Don't make it hard, because the easier it is, the more frequent we're going to do it, and then the more it becomes a habit. Just like children, you crawl, you walk, you run, all of that. And so I even say, you want to become a reader, but you don't like reading. Okay, just read for 20 seconds. You can commit to 20 seconds. Heck, we're on social media for longer than that each day. And then if you find after 20 seconds you're still engaged, keep reading, great. Or you find you hate it, put the book down. It's okay. I don't have one in front of me. I have one behind me, I think, but the hourglasses, the 15-minute, 30-minute hourglasses, I use those a lot when I really want to work on or need to work on something that I don't want to do. I can do it for 15 minutes. Okay, I can suck it up for 15 minutes. So I tell myself, okay, hourglass, here we go, 15 minutes. If at the end of this 15 minutes, I still hate it and my brain's not into it and I don't want to do it, I'm walking away. But at least I got 15 minutes done.
Like that.
Because 15 minutes each day, if I'm planning, avoids procrastination and I'll get it done. And then I don't have to torture myself for hours. What usually happens though is you start getting in the zone after about 15 minutes and, okay,
Yeah.
and then it's just a win-win. But those sort of ways to say, okay, knowing that we're creatures of habit, how do you create sustainable habits? And it truly is
Hmm.
just bite-sized pieces consistently.
Yeah. So if you, I mean, and this is a great example because like, you knew you got that feedback. Okay, I need to listen more. How does, how does one find out what they need to work on? Like if if I'm doing true evaluation of my own leadership style and I'm like, I don't know what I see my team's not engaging, those are great tips on how to know if maybe connection's not quite there. What would you suggest to somebody who's trying to evaluate themselves?
And this is the vulnerability piece a little bit, right? Find find the individual that you know will at least give you an honest answer. They might not give you a candid answer. And I say, and they're a little bit different. They'll tell you the truth, but they might not tell you everything because they don't want to hurt your feelings or they don't know you really well. Just go ask. Just say, hey, because
Hmm.
as humans, we often want to help each other. If somebody that I don't know comes to me and says, or know well, at least says, hey, Kylie, I value your opinion. Would you mind giving me some feedback on how you thought I acted in that meeting? And I'm like, I don't really know you, but I sat with you in the meeting. At least I would absolutely sit down with them and
Hmm.
say, okay, well, based on what I know in my perspective, here's what I witnessed. I might be a little more reserved in how I provide that feedback as opposed to, my professional colleague that I've worked with forever and just saying, you know, Bob, you did this, 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 and this. You got it like, dude, come on, because it's, but
Yeah.
go ask. It's okay. And make it feel safe for them to provide you that feedback because often people won't share thoughts because they've been conditioned to either get shut
Hmm.
down or lashed at, or they give their feedback and then it comes back and haunts them or, whatever. And so equally saying, hey, Anna, I'm trying to grow a little bit, learn how do you think that call went? Or are there things that you would have done differently? Or do you think people resonated with my message?
Hmm.
Anything you're willing to share with me, Anna, is great. But if you don't have anything or don't feel comfortable, that's fine too. Or you can email it to me, making it safe for them without putting them on the spot too, but just take that step. Most people are absolutely willing to at least say, hey, well, let me think about it and I'll follow up here. And then they'll send you an email on something.
I
Um,
like that.
and then you almost start building those truth brokers. Some people already know who
Yeah.
they are. Some people got to find them.
I like that. It's kind of a win-win scenario. You're learning to get better and you're building a trusted relationship with the individual you reached out to. Oh, that's such a great tip. Um,
Lazy by nature, I think, people, and myself included. There's times I'm like, I'm a scientist in this. I studied this forever, and I don't even know how to do it right. It's we're just lazy by nature. So it's like, okay, if I really want this, I got it. It's on.
yeah,
I can't blame anybody else, so I'm going to go ask. And it's not easy, but anytime you feel that little bit of discomfort, you're growing because we have to. Without discomfort, we don't grow.
true.
Just like
That is
muscle,
so true.
you're lifting weights, you got to stretch
The,
them a little bit. So
yeah, the pain is there. If you don't feeling the pain, you're probably too complacent.
probably too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is really, man, this is so good. And time's flying. Okay, we promised to leave questions at the end. If you guys have some, put them in the chat. Kylie will answer them live. Okay, let's get into I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about how leaders can create these environments. So we talked a little bit about you yourself as a leader, how you and I don't know if you see me, Kylie, but I'm totally taking notes for
Oh,
myself.
you're good. I
Told you
mean,
guys. Like, okay, I can get better at this. But so we talked a little bit about, transactional versus transformational, how we as leaders can, identify ways to get better and things that we can do to get 1% better every day. Love that. Let's switch to like as leaders creating those environments so our teams, other organizations we work with really feel heard and valued. What's your
a great
approach there
question.
and tips on how to do that?
Yeah. And part of doing this, I want folks to understand too, we don't have endless hours in the day, right? And so we have to find ways where it's like, I don't have 6 hours where I can go have a day trip with Anna and get to know her and all that. Sometimes the transactional, it feels like a time bound thing. You can have transformational interactions in a short amount of time. It's really what are they about, and building opportunities in between the quick, because you're always going to have transactional. What you have to do is be so intentional about creating the strong relationships to begin with that when the transactional happens, you already know each other's intent. You already know where you're coming from. So when you do the breeze, it's fine. But creating, as leaders, creating those environments, I don't think we realize, or at least I didn't realize initially, how much with my team. I was I'm a very hands-off leader, and I assume that they know what they're doing and they have no questions, and they'll let me know if they need something, which for some people is great. And I greatly failed an individual one time by doing this, and I will never do it again. Some folks are like, oh, that's the best leadership ever, autonomy, go do my thing. Yeah, until somebody was young in their career and needed set expectations, and I'm over here going, oh, they'll let me know. And then they kept not doing great. And I would say, hey, let me know what you need. But they didn't know what they needed. They didn't know. So every time I'm like, okay, let me know what you need. Let me know how I can support. And I'm thinking, I'm asking them, I'm telling them, I'll give them training, I'll send them to, whatever they need, I'll help them. They didn't know what they needed. And I didn't know what they needed because I didn't take enough time to really, really interact. It was just tell me what you need. And so it's taking the time to understand the person enough, and you don't have to do that in large chunks of time. It's just paying attention. So being very aware of people's tendencies. When somebody goes quiet that is always talking, that's a cue. So how do we make it safe for them to speak up? So understanding sort of what's going on, but also not focusing so much on the what, but the why. So if I need numbers in an organization, or I need this project done, or I need an update, where's that common value? We're trying to accomplish something together that is bigger than the numbers. So how do you find those connections that are outside of the transactional? So, if you work for a mission-driven organization, I guess I'm thinking more nonprofit type of world, or healthcare, something that's very easily, wow, you're there to help others. That's pretty obvious to get around. You're there for not to do IT or do this or that. You're there to help others, help people, and you all can gather around that. So finding those little moments to remind each other of that, putting yourself in those positions where, again, you're vulnerable, so you can show the example that it's okay to be human. Like, you don't always have to have a facade, but I don't expect you to be the same person you are with your family that you are at work. Like, it's just not going to happen. And sometimes being that example, you have to be intentional because others have never seen that example before because they've worked for toxic organizations or bad leaders, or they've just never felt safe doing it. And that is a very real thing. You can't just say, well, I said I have an open door, so they should just come to me. It's an open door. It doesn't work that way. If they've always had leaders that said I have an open door and they go in there and then they get, down the road, they're going to learn that it's truly not an open door. And so that consistency again with the team creates those situations. But, even in organizations that aren't healthcare or nonprofits or any of that, they work with an IT company. And to me, I don't get real excited about IT, and that's okay. But I do get excited about the work that we do for other industries. So we help healthcare through IT so they can go do great work for patients. We connect so much with different businesses that allows them to be better businesses. And HR, I don't know anything about IT engineering, but whatever I can do to help remove barriers for our engineers and the team that does the great work, that makes a difference. And so I connect with those around that and letting them know that, hey, I'm not your traditional HR. I know you're busy. If you need something, and we're remote on top of that, being that face, for them. And so it really is, again, creating sort of those habitual, consistent environments where there's opportunities to not just talk about the work, but talk about the person and connect. And that doesn't mean having no accountability. You can still, actually probably means more, because somebody's going to have a hard conversation or a kind conversation with you when you're not doing maybe your best. It just means connecting as humans, and humans have all sorts of things in life and feelings and thoughts and challenges. And so it's being allowed to do that in that space.
I like that. I like that you said intentional.
Yeah.
That, you make those moments count. And that, speaks volumes for those other moments where they're are more transactional. Because you're right. Like
She don't
we
have
came
time.
here to job, we came here to do a job. We have to do that. Can't
Yep.
always be over indexing into that transformational piece.
I always say, think of that one person that you have one moment with, like, and I'm sure we all have them, that either makes you feel like, oh, I literally spent 5 seconds with them and they just put me in a bad mood, or I spent 5 seconds with them and I'm having the best day of my life. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, they completely changed my day at the gas station because of their smile or whatever. It doesn't take a ton.
You're
But
right.
yeah,
You're absolutely right. I think sometimes we try to overcomplicate it and we has to be this grand gesture as a leader. And it's like, no, you're actually right. The very consistent moments to being like just checking in with your team
yeah, I know who I'm
matters.
gonna get when I talk to Kylie and that she's coming from a good place. So even
Yeah.
and the grace on my bad days, then I get the grace. It's like, ooh, I'm having a really good day, and I don't think she meant it that way. So I'm going to see if she's okay, or I'm going to let it slide. Those sort of
Yeah.
things makes life a
Yeah.
little easier.
A little easier. Yes. And we need we need those moments. I think sometimes, you know, and experiences that I've had when I'm meeting with my team members, I'm like, oh, they're doing fine. Like,
Yep.
let's just skip it. Let's just get down to business, you know? And then I have to be like, nope,
Yeah.
let me just check in because I can't make assumptions. But it's hard. Like you said, our brains get lazy. Like you saying that to me today, I'm
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, that's totally me sometimes.
Oh, there's
Okay.
probably people in the car right now, like, okay, we've been going 45 minutes, like, we're on autopilot, got it, you just what's on my to-do list. But I love
Yeah.
that you brought up the how you doing it. Anybody, and there's a lot of different models out there for meetings, but oh my gosh, I would challenge anybody that's ever been in a meeting. They're like, oh, let's just skip the segue, or let's just skip how are we doing today? Let's just skip because it does. It seems like the least valuable, and it sometimes isn't as valuable. But then I would always say maybe you need to ask a different question of each other. Like the interaction is not valuable,
Yes.
but if you're asking stupid things or saying, I should say stupid, but if you
Yeah,
know
yeah,
each other,
yeah.
oh, maybe the what's your favorite candy bar question, you all know that about each other. So maybe you need to ask something else like I don't know if what's your biggest challenge this week that you're really wrestling with mentally outside of work? I don't something like that. There's always something you
Yeah.
can say.
Yeah.
So I always say there's no stupid introduction or nicety or saying there's just maybe better questions that can be asked of each other instead of being lazy and like, let's just get to business. Oh, but I laugh because I mean, there's still times we do it on different leadership teams and I know better. Um,
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think that's the better question, like you just said. Um, let's ask a better question. Because I've been in, situations where, my leader is like, oh, we'll just skip the icebreaker for today. Let's just go straight in. And I'm like, okay, but if it's a time issue, let's do a fun question, but something that's doesn't have to go around the horn and everyone answer. It's more of like, raise your hand if, or, something more fast but engaging because yeah, you can't skip that. Like we're human and we're fully remote too. So even more so, we can't skip those moments because then connection starts to dim. Um, but I like your call to action there of like, just ask a better question or something more appropriate for the context or the
mhm.
time element. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm getting off track, but this has been awesome. I'm learning a ton. Um, let's see. We only have a few more minutes. And if we don't get to questions, we can take them offline or get back to you. But if you guys do have a question for Kylie, please put it in the chat. Kylie, okay, let's talk about these buzzwords. So I'm sure you've heard a ton. And sometimes you hear leadership just saying things. And you're like, how do
Yeah.
I put that into practice? So how can we, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying some of it's so philosophical. It's like, what do I actually do with that? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, it's really about that framework. Anyways, I'm just curious, like your thoughts there, like what are some of the buzzwords you are hearing or you've seen in the past? And it's like, how do you kind of navigate that to create a more sustainable framework for your performance reviews or just one-on-ones, like just have like having more structure there
Yeah.
so that you can actually get to solving for the actual pain point.
Yeah. I think empathy is a huge one that we always hear is, just make sure you're always empathetic with person and empathetic leadership. And that absolutely is true. I think we do need to have empathy too, but like, what does that really mean on a day-to-day basis?
Mm.
Because to me, the most empathetic person I ever encountered was the one that told me nobody liked me. Um,
Gosh, I mean,
because he set
change.
my whole career up. And it doesn't mean a lack of accountability, but I think it is truly, again, if I could sum everything up into leadership, there's so many ways to do it, right? There's a billion books on it. It's an industry where it's I say flavor of the month. It could be the best flavor ever, but it's still, there's all these sorts of things, and there's spin-offs, and there's this framework, and there's this model, and there's this and this and this, and a lot of brilliant people, right? You have to find what works for you, because there's so much good. There's so much similar. There's so much difference. You can read, and I have books all in front of me, but it's, Malcolm Gladwell is out there with amazing stuff that he's had forever.
Yeah.
There's, Adam Grant that has some amazing stuff out. There's all sorts of things. EOS traction, all these operational models. There's no silver bullet. If there was, somebody would be very, very wealthy right now running all these companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Too often we're trying to find something to fix, to slap on, to fix an internal problem. And there's just not an answer. You have to find what's right for you. And that means paying attention and being intentional. So if you find that a leadership journal doesn't work for you, don't do it. It's okay. Find what does. If you find that buying a certain outfit with a certain pair of shoes makes you go exercise, great, go do that. If that motivates you, who cares? You got you out the door, right? Just because somebody else is saying, go run barefoot. That's the new way to do training. Wasn't that a trend or something? Or might
Yes. Yeah, my
but
brother, he still
yes.
does it. Yeah.
And it might be the best
Wild.
way ever. So
Yeah.
good. I have no clue. Whether it works or not, the placebo effect. Find what works for you and then be consistent. And don't be too hard on ourselves, but also apply that to other people. Because if we're struggling as leaders to do a better job and do these things, and we're focusing on it, they're not even focusing on it, and they're humans. They may not even want to or realize they need to. And so that patient, really being patient in those interactions, but bringing the intentionality, making sure that every interaction that you have with somebody, there's a reason for it. And maybe the reason is just to put a smile on their face. It doesn't have to be an operational or tactical reason. It simply could be an intentional engagement for no other reason than to let them know that you thought about them and you're going to give them a smile today. That matters. But be intentional with what you're doing. Don't just be like, oh shoot, I gotta show up at this meeting and do this and then walk away and just go through. Don't go on autopilot. And that's the hardest thing we can do, because that's all our brains are telling us to do. Physiologically, we are built to go on autopilot with our brains. So you have to fight that. And so then I say, right, find your Post-it notes or your journals or whatever it is for you that'll make you that 1% better, or pay attention. And then once you've built that habit, move on to the next one and say, okay, I've got that habit down. Now what am I going to do? Just with my leadership journals, they started out very just free flowing. Now I'm very like, oh, okay, I'm having a day where I need to be a strong female leader in a room full of men. I'm going to go find my leadership journal that talks about that and talks about a power dynamic. And then I'm going to look at what I wrote in there and get things from that. HR professionals, I don't know how many termination conversations some of them have sat in. Oh my gosh, I thought I was going to puke my first one. I think I'm going to puke every single one. That's okay. But I also know now that I'm not terminating somebody as long as I did what I needed to do. And I can live with that, because that makes me feel good that I did what I needed to do. But I didn't learn that overnight. It was like, oh gosh, I'm terminating them. They're going to yell at me. They're going to kill me. But it's like, no, I had the caring conversation. I gave them opportunities. I was real with them. They might not like me. They're going to be mad. They're going to be emotional. And I understand why. But over time, I learned and got the perspective that it's not me. And so that's why that consistency and those habits are so important. So when you're doing performance reviews or doing your one-on-ones, be intentional and be consistent. And again, I am so guilty of this too. I'll hop on a one-on-one with my team member and it's like, all right, what do you got today? All right, you don't have anything? I don't have anything either. All right, okay. And then we'll either chat or hop on. Like, okay, we're all busy. I just wasted time. Or I at least could have built a stronger relationship with more intentional chatter. And not that informal chatter isn't valuable. It is. But it's just, we do it too often unintentionally.
Yep.
But sometimes I'll get off the call with her. I'm like, oh, I forgot her child had that this week, and I should remember, so I could at least ask her about that because she cares about that.
Yeah.
So that intentionality and those habits are just critical. And knowing that if you're not willing to do the work to drive it, the change isn't going to happen. And that's, it's not right or wrong. It's just, are you willing to do that to make the change?
Mhm.
And I think that's where we find the best leaders. My mentors, they don't stop learning and they don't stop putting themselves out there. And I'm like, oh man, the effort
Yes.
into being great leaders, it's not by accident.
Yeah. So do you feel like autopilot's like the biggest mistake
Yeah.
leaders fall into?
Yeah. And I don't know that I'd call it a mistake. It's just by nature, it's
Huh.
that awareness of that's what our brains want to do. We want to be, that's why uncertainty is hard. That's why when we don't have an answer or change management, you think when it's done wrong, leaders are like, well, this is going to happen and just do it. And people get panicky or don't like it or they resist it. There is a physiological, and Matthew Lieberman out of UCLA, a famous study years ago with MRIs, the same receptors in our brain that trigger physical pain, those same receptors are triggered with emotional pain. So go take an IV. They always say, broken heart, go take an ibuprofen. But there is some truth to that. We feel physical pain, not to the same degree as a car accident or something like that. But the same pain receptors are like, alert, alert, alert. This does not feel good. This feels uncomfortable. This feels uncomfortable. Run, run, run.
Hmm.
And we do that, but we're not, it's just sort of happening. And so that's why I say there's a balance. You want to feel some level of discomfort, but your instinct is to run away or just go back to autopilot, but not so much that you shut down. And that's a little bit different for everybody. And I think that's why it's not a mistake as leaders. It's just, again, that intentionality and awareness and finding that out what that is for you. And oh my gosh, give yourself grace because it's going to take time. Like it took, I still look at myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, why was I so dumb today? It takes it's like, okay, but I'm better than I was at 22 years old. So I mean,
Yeah.
right. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's what makes those transformational relationships important. We're all human and we're all connected in some way. And if we can model that behavior intentionally, consistently, and help others find those tools for them, it'll just make us better all around.
Yeah, I think that's the part that's so fascinating to me is like when we are better and we can help others get better, like it just domino effect. Like it just spreads and then we're all better. And it's like, oh, isn't that why we're here? Help each other. And then, our organizations are better, our customers are better, our business metrics are better. Yeah.
Easier said than done, right? Or I think we'd all done it by now.
Of course. Yeah. We can say it on an hour call and feel
I
good
think that's
about it
where you
though.
find life-changing people too, is the ones that did, like you said, it's usually not by accident. Um, there's luck in life, but most things took effort of some sort or
Yeah.
intention.
But I like your tips on, being intentional about it, don't missing an opportunity when the opportunity is there and don't go on autopilot. Like, oh, it's just, we're going through the motions. But finding those little small things to remind ourselves, like the listen post-it. I think we probably could all put something on a post-it right now and put it up there. But just the being consistent about it, and 1% better. Our CEO always says, like, how do we get 10% better? And sometimes I'm like, how about 1%?
Better's
But,
better.
but but the
Whatever that
point is like, okay, if we need to get 10% better, how do I back into that by being 1% better in everyday things? So, but I like that mentality because that means you're on a progressive spectrum, that you're not going to go.
sustains
Yeah, it is sustain. Yeah,
even
exactly.
if
And
it's not for a day.
yeah, and the autopilot, you're not going anywhere. So
Yeah.
like you got to remember that's a good way. So hopefully from this chat, everybody, thanks for joining us. Kylie, you've been incredible. So glad you were here and taking the time to share your wisdom with us. Very fascinating. And we'll take some of these tips. We'll post this. So if you guys want to watch it or share it with, peers or colleagues or your team on just how to get better at being leaders and taking the time to do that. I think it's super important. We obviously feel that way here at NABA. So thank you, Kylie. Can't thank you enough. And then if you want to come to our next one, we have a missing chapters every month. Next month, we are going to be talking about, what the chapter that's sometimes missed on hiring, and how do we think about hiring from I have this need today, or am I hiring for our future team needs? And so Skylar from Hope from Haiti is going to join us in a few weeks. So if you want to join, please come to that. And if you're not a part of our community already, we would love to have you. This is an opportunity for HR professionals like Kylie. You can come and connect with, ask other questions. This, share. I think there was a question earlier this week about tools that they use. Somebody needed a gifting platform. So they went into the community and they're like, hey, what do you guys use? Or how do I do this for culture or hiring? Or just a great way to share best practices and tips, or even continue our conversation today. So love to have you there. If you're not a member already, please join us. And again, Kylie, seriously, I could go. I hope we have you come back and dive even deeper into the science of leadership and our brains and how we can be better. Like, hopefully you'll join us again on another Missing Chapters. So thanks, everybody. So glad you were here, and hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.